Hello everyone, Joe here. Thanks for tuning into my channel. So last night I played against an opponent on Ad Nauseam combo, which I don't think I have any videos on my channel yet, so I was excited. It was a fun match, and I wasn't recording, so I'm going to show you guys the replay here, so we'll be able to see what I had and what the opponent had. This was a little bit exciting for me as well, because this was the first time I encountered somebody on Cursecatcher who I guess recognized me from my channel. This guy, before seeing any of my cards, just told me that he's quite a fan of Merfolk, so that was nice. So we rolled, and the opponent won the die roll. I get a no lander, so that's going to be a mulligan. Let's see what the opponent got. Okay, he's got 4 lands, 2 Phyrexian Unlifes, and a Lightning Storm in his hand. Typically you don't want the Lightning Storm in your hand, but we'll see who kept what. So being on the play, the opponent had to choose first, and he took a mulligan. Let's see. You can see my hand got much better with 2 lands, AEther Vial, Cursecatcher, Merrow Reejerey, Cure, Great Glassspinner. It's not the fastest hand in the world, but it's certainly playable. And the opponent on his side got a single land, but a Lotus Bloom. Still has the Lightning Storm in his hand, pretty awkward. Spoils of the Vault to dig for whatever it is that he needs. Phyrexian Unlife and Angel's Grace. So both of those sort of performing the same function in this deck for those of you who are unfamiliar with it. Essentially, the opponent wants to draw and play Ad Nauseam, which lets him reveal cards from the top of his deck and lose life equal to the converted mana cost of that card. But with Phyrexian Unlife in play, he can keep drawing his entire deck because he doesn't lose the game for having 0 or less life. Similarly, Angel's Grace says you can't lose the game this turn until the end of turn. Damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. That part doesn't really matter when they're drawing cards. The part that says you can't lose the game this turn is the important part, because the opponent will draw their whole deck, go to something like negative 100 life, but since they can't lose, they don't die from having negative 100, and having drawn their whole deck, they have Lightning Storm in hand, which they can usually exile some number of Simian Spirit Guides to pay for the casting cost. And then Lightning Storm is a very unique card in the sense that it's an instant, which while it's on the stack, has an activated ability. So while this card is on the stack, the opponent with priority, if he holds priority, which he's supposed to do, he can discard a land card as many times as he wants, and he puts 2 charge counters on Lightning Storm. So Lightning Storm deals X damage to target creature, where X is 3, creature or player, where X is 3 plus the number of charge counters. So for every land card you discard, you put 2 charge counters on Lightning Storm. So it's 2 damage plus the original 3. So if you discard 9 land cards, that's 18 charge counters for 18 damage plus 3. It's lethal for 21 against most decks. So the opponent draws their whole deck. They have something like 15 to 20 lands in their hand, and they can do more than lethal, and that's how the deck wins, basically. So I think we both chose to keep at this point. Looks like the opponent actually went down to 5. He didn't like that. The Lightning Storm was probably bugging him. So instead, here now he has 2 lands, Lotus Bloom for mana acceleration, Peer Through Depths to hopefully hit, let's see, an instant or sorcery card. This hits all his pieces pretty much except Phyrexian Unlife, which is an enchantment. This can hit Angel's Grace, it can hit Ad Nauseam, it can hit Spoils of the Vault. So the opponent chose to keep at this point. So I looked at my library and liked what I saw on the top. I think it was a Merrow Reejerey. And I think the opponent forgot to scry. It's a little bit unfortunate for them. Yep, there's the Merrow Reejerey. We're going to open with Minamo into AEther Vial. Okay, the opponent takes a counter off of Lotus Bloom and draws a land. Not incredible. Passes the turn. Now Peer Through Depths, it costs 2 mana and is an instant. So the opponent can cast that on this turn. I play the Wanderwine Hub, reveal Silvergill to untap Wanderwine Hub and play Silvergill. Choosing to reveal Merrow Reejerey here in order to keep Cursecatcher a surprise. That's always a good thing to do whenever your opponent has mana open, even when they don't really. So I think the opponent went for Peer Through Depths here. And with him on a mulligan to 5, this card lets him look at the top 5 cards of his library and take the most important instant or sorcery from among them into his hand and put the rest on the bottom of his library in any order. For me, Cursecatcher is definitely going to counter this thing. The opponent has tapped out to play it, and Cursecatcher is a 1-drop. This is a 2-drop, so it's great. Great opportunity to use Aether Vial to bring Cursecatcher in and counter a pretty important spell. The opponent drew into Phyrexian Unlife, and with his 3rd land, he has enough to go ahead and play that. Okay, this means I'm going to have to do even more damage to him to win the game. Okay, so I draw my 3rd land, and I think it's time to put the pedal to the metal. I Vial in Master of the Pearl Trident and cast Merrow Reejerey and swing with Silvergill Adept for 4, bringing the opponent down to 16. The opponent's Lotus Bloom is going to come off of Suspend and resolve, and the opponent draws into Laboratory Maniac, which says if he would draw a card while his library has no cards in it, he wins the game instead. This is a card that's sort of like a secondary win condition with Ad Nauseam, because Ad Nauseam draws your whole deck, and if this guy is on the battlefield when you cast Ad Nauseam and you have no cards in your deck, I think Ad Nauseam, you can try to draw that 61st card in your deck, and since you can't do it, this guy wins you the game. So it's just an alternate win condition. Doing some quick math on my side of the table, we have 3, 3, 4, and 4, so that is 14 damage, 6 plus 8, and the opponent's at 16. It's a little bit unfortunate, the math, but not too bad. The idea with Phyrexian Unlife is even if he's at 1 life, we have to waste an entire attack step getting him to 0 or less life, because before that point, well, let's look at the card for a second. You don't lose the game for having 0 or less life. As long as you have 0 or less life, all damage is dealt as though its source had infect. So if the opponent has 1 life, that means he does not lose the game for having 0 or less. This is the part that's important. So I can attack for 200 damage. He'll go to negative 199. But this part of this card says he doesn't lose the game for that reason. Now, since at the beginning of damage, he had 1 life, this part of the card doesn't come into effect yet, as long as you have 0 or less life. So once the opponent goes to negative 199, the next time I attack him, he has 0 or less life, then all damage will be dealt as though its source had infect. So we're going to see my next turn, I basically have to just get him to less than 0. That's the important part. So here I am just thinking about the Aether Vial and the Reejerey tap effects, just trying to make sure I do the best thing possible. So I bring in a Reejerey. The opponent can't cast this with Pact of Negation, and he's not ready to go off yet, so you only use Pact of Negation on the turn where you're going to go off with Ad Nauseam, because they can rarely, if ever, pay this 5 mana, and if they do, they're just time-walking themselves. So this is just to make sure that their combo works. So here I'm going to just cast another Reejerey. I think it's a little bit of overkill at this point, but no, it's not. I decided I'm going to untap Mutavault, and actually I think it is, but it doesn't matter, because if I play the Reejerey, sorry, if I don't, at this point I have 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 5 is 13. I need to untap the Mutavault to attack for lethal. Actually, if I play this Reejerey, I think it's 5, 5, and 6, which is exactly 16, but I have 2 tap triggers anyway, so I just use it to untap the Mutavault and push a little bit of extra damage. So here again we have 5, 5, 6, and 6, so I think that's 22. The opponent should go to negative 6. Yep, losing 22. Okay, so now the opponent is at 0 or less life, so he's going to go to infect damage next turn. Okay, so the opponent didn't get there that game. He drew a second Pact of Negation. So this is a decent example. The opponent did mulligan to 5, but you can see how clunky some of these combo hands can get. They play the Pact of Negations so that when they draw their entire deck, they have 3 or 4 counter spells that they can use to push through any amount of control. So that was the first game. We both mulliganed. The opponent went actually down to 5. I only went down to 6. Okay, let's get the second game started. Okay, my hand looks really solid with 2 lands, a counterspell. Echoing Truth stayed in the deck specifically for Phyrexian Unlife. Also, they play like Pentad Prisms, and slowing them down in their mana is a decent way to disrupt this particular combo deck. I've got 3 creatures in hand, including 2 lords, to push some damage. Let's see how the opponent's side of things looks. He's got Serum Visions to fix the top of his deck. Darkness to gain him a turn. It's basically a black fog. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. A Peer Through Depths. It's like a more powerful Serum Visions. And Laboratory Maniac is that alternate win condition. So I think we both kept this game. Yep. Opponent opens with Sea Chrome Coast into Serum Visions, drawing a Lightning Storm. Again, pretty clunky having Lightning Storm in hand. Okay, and the opponent chose to put, if we pause for a second, he put a Lotus Bloom from the top of his library on the bottom of his library. And what else? That was it. One of the cards stayed on the top, but we don't know what that is. So I drew into a second counterspell, which against combo decks I'm not unhappy to see as long as I have some creatures to play. Okay, opponent draws into Phyrexian Unlife, which is a great draw for him. That's one of the pieces he needs to go off. So I drew into my 3rd land, which is great because as you can see the hand, I have many, many spells, but not too many lands. Okay, so we were on the draw this game, and against a combo opponent, I chose with counterspells in hand to play the controlling role for the time being. Now, if the opponent decides to try to resolve something like Phyrexian Unlife next turn, we have a counterspell to hit it. So he draws into a Simian Spirit Guide, and he tries to go for Peer Through Depths. Now I have 2 choices here. I can negate it with my 2 mana open, or I can use Dispel. I check, and Peer Through Depths is in fact an instant, and since Dispel can only hit instants, I decide rather than use my mana as efficiently as possible and cast Negate, Negate can hit more things. Negate can hit things like Phyrexian Unlife, which is an enchantment, which Dispel can't touch. So I'm going to use the Dispel here to counter Peer Through Depths. Okay, Kira as a 3-drop. I don't think the opponent is bringing in a lot of spot removal, so Kira here is probably going to take a backseat to one of my creatures. So I reveal Lord of Atlantis to bring Wanderwine Hub in tapped, play the Lord of Atlantis, and unfortunately I'm only representing another Dispel. I don't have access to mana to cast Negate. The opponent here is going to choose to lead with Pentad Prism instead of trying to resolve Phyrexian Unlife, an interesting choice. So Pentad Prism is an artifact that with Sunburst, which means that it cares what colors are used to cast it. So if he casts it for blue and white, he can put 2 charge counters on this artifact. And then for each charge counter he removes, he can add 1 mana of any color to his mana pool. So right now the opponent has access to 5 mana on the table. We can see this awkward Lightning Storm in hand. Pretty awkward Laboratory Maniac. The Darkness is great for gaining him some time, and I don't know that the Simian Spirit Guide is particularly useful right now. Okay, it would have been great to hit a 4th land there, so I can play 2 2-drop spells this turn. Instead, I'm going to choose to attack with the Lord of Atlantis and leave up Negate, still playing the controlling role. Would have been much better if I had more land this game. We can see the opponent draws a fast land here, which will come into play tapped because it's his 4th land. And the opponent with my mana up decides to just pass the turn here. Guess he doesn't feel threatened with only a 2/2 creature on the battlefield and himself sitting at 18 life. So I'm thinking here if I want to bounce his Pentad Prism, just for a tempo play, since there's probably not going to be too many other valid targets. You can always do something like use Echoing Truth on Phyrexian Unlife and then use Negate to counter it on the way back. At that point, though, I chose to keep it in hand. I continue to not hit my 4th land, which makes it really difficult to continue being the controlling deck. I realized that after having whiffed on 2 or 3 land drops, that I can't sit back with a grizzly bear and attack, so I play the Master of the Pearl Trident to increase my clock. Swing for 3, the opponent takes 3. Now 2 Simian Spirit Guides in hand can lead to a lot of shenanigans, because I'll think that the opponent has no mana and he can just sort of go off unexpectedly. So the opponent passed here with 4 mana. Let's think about what that might mean. He still has Darkness up. I don't know that he would use it to prevent just 6 damage. Lightning Storm is an instant, but he can only really do something with it if he's going to discard lands, but he doesn't have any lands in his hand. I guess he could kill one of my lords with it. So he can exile Simian Spirit Guides, but to what effect? I would have expected him to play the Phyrexian Unlife the last turn. But I draw my 4th land. I'm very happy to see. So after thinking for a moment, I decide just to attack first to see what the opponent leaves his mana up for. He took 6, going down to 9. Play the Wanderwine Hub, revealing Harbinger of the Tides, representing that I want to flash this guy in at the end of the turn. But I have Echoing Truth and Negate to fight through anything that the opponent might play. I can bounce his Phyrexian Unlife with Echoing Truth and then potentially counter it if he tries to play it again. The opponent has 2 Darkness now, which is going to gain him a lot of time. Okay, he decides just to pass. Now here, with all this mana up, I'm just going to go ahead and bounce his Pentad Prism to set him back on his tempo. If he wants to play Pentad Prism again, he'll have to devote the mana to it the next turn. So that's going to resolve. The Pentad Prism gets bounced. I'll untap. And for my side of things, it looks like I have the green light to go ahead and start attacking. I'm gonna lead with the Lord. That'll only make my guys up to 4/4s. Not lethal. But the opponent uses one of his Darknesses here to fog me. I decide to let that resolve because I only have 1 counterspell in hand, and he could try to just go off with Angel's Grace and Ad Nauseam. So I have lethal on board right now. So it's between 3, 3, and 3. So that's, 4, 4, and 4. So it's 12 damage on the table. Okay, so the opponent's going to play his Phyrexian Unlife now. Angel's Grace is kind of a redundant effect. On Unlife, I negate the Phyrexian Unlife with my open mana. The opponent has exactly 1 black mana up to cast his 2nd Darkness. Okay, so Silvergill revealing the already revealed Harbinger to see if I can draw into a counterspell. Now, it's worth noting here that I think in response to the Silvergill Adept, the opponent probably should have cast the Darkness. He doesn't need to wait until the attack step to cast this. It just says prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. If he resolves this during my main phase, it'll still prevent any damage that I'll do. And by letting me resolve the Silvergill Adept's card drawing ability, he gives me a chance to draw into a Dispel or a Negate. I didn't, however, so I'm going to go ahead to the attack step. Opponent casts a 2nd Darkness. Okay, I'm going to play 3 mana and just throw Kiro out on the table in case he has a Path to Exile for one of my lords. So we can see in this spot here, the opponent does not have any action. He has an Angel's Grace to keep him from dying, which will be good if he draws into, I guess, Ad Nauseam. Angel's Grace is not fantastic against attacks as a way of saving yourself because you'll still take the damage. You'll still go to like -10 life. It won't kill you that turn, but when you go to your next turn and get priority, the game sees that you have negative life and you'll die at that point. Alright, so it looks like I have the game won unless the opponent draws Ad Nauseam, which he did. So with the 2 Simian Spirit Guides, he has exactly 6 mana to cast and resolve Ad Nauseam and Angel's Grace. So that was a pretty sick top deck. That's the power of these combo decks, is that, you know, they can hit their 1 card and just win the game on the spot. So I chose to ask the opponent to show me his deck. I haven't seen his win condition yet. He didn't play any lightning storms or anything at this point. Actually, he chose to go off on his upkeep, or rather his draw step, I think. No, on his draw step, just to be, fancy and not go to his main step, because Ad Nauseam is a combo that goes off at instant speed. He actually thought that he lost because if you, recall he had the Lightning Storm in his hand, though he would have anyway after resolving Ad Nauseam. So he had the Lightning Storm, and realizing that Lightning Storm costs 3 mana to resolve, he thought that he only had the 2 Simian Spirit Guides left, and thought that he lost, but then realized he could go to his main phase. Okay, so the opponent thought that he lost, but then he realizes that he can play out one of his lands, and then he has access to 2 Simian Spirit Guides and the Plains to get Lightning Storm going, and he has more than enough lands in hand to discard. As I mentioned when I first started talking about Lightning Storm, it takes 9 lands to get me down from 20, because that's 9 times 2 plus 3. He shows me the 9 lands. That's 18 damage plus the original 3 from Lightning Storm. So unfortunately, I had a lot of power on the board, played the game pretty slow and controlling, and almost got there except for a top-decked Ad Nauseam. Let's go ahead to game 3, see how that one played out. Now, if I had drawn into a 4th land earlier that game, I think things would have gone much differently. I have an excellent hand here with a Counterspell, a Silvergill Adept, and a bunch of other creatures. The opponent, if we look, has the 2 pieces that he needs to go off, but not too much mana acceleration. He only has the 4 lands, and the 2 combo pieces and a Simian Spirit Guide. He does have a Temple of Deceit to scry, the top card on his deck. I'll start by playing Oboro and passing the turn. The opponent's going to scry with Temple of Deceit. He's looking at the top card, and he likes the top card. He drew Lotus Bloom for the turn and suspends it. That was a great draw for the opponent. I draw a 3rd land, which is great for me. Very typical turn 2, I'm going to play Silvergill Adept, revealing Lord of Atlantis, and hit my 4th land. So for a hand that started off pretty light on lands with only 2, I've drawn into 2, and I hope that's about all I'll draw as far as lands go. The opponent continues hitting scry effects, so Temple of Deceit on turn 1 into Serum Visions turn 2. Draws a Lightning Storm off of Serum Visions, which is pretty awkward. And he put a Seachrome Coast on the bottom of his library. Actually, I think he put 2 Seachrome Coasts on the bottom of his library. Okay, I draw a 5th land. Not perfect. At this point, with the Lotus Bloom on 2, it doesn't seem particularly close to going off. So I think that I'm going to lead with a Lord, put Mutavault out as an extra body to attack next turn, and just push as much damage as I can. So the opponent goes down to 17. Lotus Bloom will take another counter off. That will come off suspend next turn. The opponent draws into a Spoils of the Vault. This is a card that I haven't really talked about yet. So Spoils of the Vault is a 1 black instant that asks you to name a card and then reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal the named card. You put that card in your hand and you remove all the other cards from the game. They all get exiled, and you lose 1 life for each of the removed cards. So if you name, say you have Ad Nauseam in hand, you need to hit an Angel's Grace. So with this card, you can name Angel's Grace, and you'll keep flipping cards until you hit that Angel's Grace. Now, it's a little bit tricky because you don't get the Angel's Grace in your hand until Spoils of the Vault resolves, and when it resolves, you lose all that life. So if you're at 5 life and you try to resolve Spoils of the Vault for Angel's Grace, you can only look at the top 4 basically, because if you look at the top 5, you're going to lose 5 life and go to 0, and you'll die before Angel's Grace ever gets cast. So Spoils of the Vault, very powerful card because you can have Angel's Grace and need to draw Ad Nauseam or vice versa. So very, very useful for hitting a second combo piece. Alright, so that was the opponent's draw for the turn. He's just going to play Fast Land in Seachrome Coast and pass the turn back to me. I drew a Cursecatcher. It's good to hit bodies. It's good to hit counterspell effects also. against combo decks. So we see the opponent has both combo pieces, and he'll have enough mana next turn with the Lotus Bloom to resolve it. So worried about that, I'm going to play the Cavern of Souls and play the Cursecatcher. And then I'm going to leave Negate up and Cursecatcher. So this turn, choosing just to swing with the Silvergill and the Lord of Atlantis for 5 damage. The opponent goes down to 12. I'm going to let Lotus Bloom resolve, because that's not the important part. Ad Nauseam and Angel's Grace are the important things. So he actually, this is where I think he got a little bit cocky, is there's a Cursecatcher on the table. He has a Simian Spirit Guide to play around the Cursecatcher. He's going to have exactly 6 mana to cast Angel Grace and Ad Nauseam, playing around Simian Spirit Guide. I have a Negate in hand, so how could this have gone differently? If I didn't have the Negate, he had a way to play around it. If he had gone to his draw step, he could have hit something like a Pact of Negation to counter my Negate and continue going off through my counterspell. Instead, again, as a combo that can go off at instant speed, I feel like sometimes there's the show-off sort of effect where they can go off on your end step or go off on your upkeep, even though there's literally no drawback to going to their draw step and picking up an extra counterspell or something. So he cracks the Lotus Bloom for 3 mana, uses 1 white to cast Angel's Grace. I'm going to let that resolve. And now for the money card, he's going to tap 2 more mana, 2 more lands for 2 mana, cast Ad Nauseam using the 3 other black mana, and that card is certainly worth me using my Negate. So with no more mana, there's nothing he can do against that. He can exile his Spirit Guide, but I'm not sacrificing Cursecatcher, I'm using Negate. And we see that he drew into a Pact of Negation, so he could have countered my Negate. Very poor play from the opponent there. Plays a Gemstone Mine. I untap another Mutavault. To tap the Mutavault, we don't have lethal, but we have a 2-turn clock, so I go ahead and attack. This is 3, 3, 2, and 2 for 10. The opponent's going to go down to 2. Frustrating not being able to close on this turn, but leave mana up again, just potentially to make him a little bit afraid that I'm representing another Negate. He draws into another Ad Nauseam, but with no effect that can keep him alive. Ad Nauseam isn't as useful. He can try Spoils of the Vault, but as I mentioned before, with only 2 life, he's only going to get to look at the top card. So not very helpful here. And with sort of overkill on the table, threatening to kill the opponent on the next turn. So messing around, the opponent exiles the Spirit Guide and casts Lightning Storm. I think he's going to target himself here. Yep, and that's just sort of a funny way to scoop. So that was it. Pretty interesting match against Ad Nauseam. Again, we haven't seen this deck on my channel yet. It's a very, very powerful deck, and one of the best combo decks in Modern. The opponent here told me that he screwed up because he went off during his upkeep. Should have went to his draw phase because he could have drawn into Pact. And showing off, he could have gone off at the end of his draw step instead of on his main phase. But, you know, he chose to be fancy on his upkeep instead. So to all of you guys who are aspiring Ad Nauseam opponents, if you can go to your draw step with literally, no downside, you should probably do it just because the opponent might be holding a Negate. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you enjoy the videos. Leave some comments if you have any thoughts to share. And I'll catch you next time.